Testing, testing.
Dave and Catherine, are you able to vote?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Could you please vote on the nomination of Kathy Ward to be board chair?
Yes.
Thank you. Catherine?
Yes.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Susanna.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks, for giving me the privilege of doing this for another term. I'm very excited about helping us usher in a new and exciting chapter for our district. So thank you very much. Now I would welcome nominations for board secretary. Susanna?
I will nominate Martha Kelly.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations?
Second.
We don't need to second it, but that's cool. Any other nominations? Martha, okay with you? Great, thank you very much. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Catherine?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Martha. I would like to appoint Susanna Everett as vice chair. And tonight we'd like to welcome our newest member, Jeanette Picard. Thank you, Jeanette, for your willingness to serve with us, and we look forward to working with you. And Catherine, congratulations on your re-election, and thank you once again for being willing to serve. Greatly appreciate it. Edith, would you read our mission statement, please?
It is the mission of the Mansfield Public Schools and partnership with the Mansfield community to ensure that each and every child develops the knowledge, skills, and distribution essential for civic engagement and personal excellence in learning, life, and work in our local and global community.
Great. Thank you very much, Edith. The public may view this meeting live at mansfieldct.gov/videos. That brings us to approval of the minutes of October 28, 2021 regular meeting. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Edith. Do I have a second? Okay. Thank you, Susanna. Any objections to approving these minutes? Any abstentions? All right, they're approved. Thank you very much. Jill, communications? I'm sorry. Jill? Oh, I apologize. Yes, please. Yeah.
No, that was my fault.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, well, we have Kathy Ward and Susanna Everett present. Martha Kelly? Yes. Edith Ellison? Yes. Dave Latrico?
Here.
Catherine Paulus?
Catherine is here. She has problems with the audio.
Okay, Jeanette Picard? Elizabeth Burge? And Kelly Zimmerman.
Great. Thank you, Jill.
And then we'll jump right into communications.
Go for it.
Mansfield Public Schools has won an honorable mention in the Bonnie V. Carney Award of Excellence for Educational Communications.
Thank you. If the members will just indulge me for a moment. 7 years ago, when our superintendent first joined us, this board determined that communications was a really, really important issue for us. And since that time, Superintendent Lyman has worked continuously to improve our district's outreach, not just with parents and staff, but with the community as a whole. Any public organization has a duty to communicate to all of its stakeholders in an open and transparent way what it is doing, why it's doing it, and how successful they are at it. I can't overstate how significant this recognition for excellence for educational communications is to our district. Kelly's worked over the years and now in collaboration with the dynamic work of our communications director, Margaret Chatty, has brought this vitally important operation up to a whole new level of excellence and professionalism. For that, we are very appreciative and very, very grateful. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you very much.
Okey-dokey. Next, hearing for visitors. Anybody like to approach the board? Any additions to the present agenda? That brings us to information, presentations, actions. Great.
Well, thank you and welcome this evening. Congratulations to those of you who were recently elected or re-elected to the board. And I would just second Kathy Ward's thanks. Our school systems could not run without volunteers such as yourselves. And I know how grateful I am for the many hours that you've devoted to this work and for your support of our work. So I don't get much opportunity to say thank you publicly to all of our board members, but I'd like to take that opportunity tonight to say so. So thank you. What you can see here on the screen, here we go. You need to go to a slideshow and the white lettering. Perfect. Thanks. So I have only a few things to share with you this evening in the superintendent's report before you. I have a lot of pictures because it's been a pretty exciting week and a half or so around here. This is, I think, just a gorgeous image of the showcase at Mansfield Middle School, developed in preparation for their Veterans Day recognition last Thursday. And I just thought it was a really nice image to get us started with this evening. Yeah, very nice. Yeah, thanks. I think you're aware that there were several very special events that happened last week, most of them on Thursday. The images that you see here include an antique vehicle that was that made its way to Southeast School. Sorry, there's a little background noise. Trying to figure out what that was. So a couple of antique military vehicles that made their way to Southeast School that allowed the kids to kind of literally climb on them, and they had uniforms to try on and such. This happens to be the vehicle in the parade that Southeast School had. You can see a couple of other images there, children lined up outside, and one of their visitors who was attending the parade. I love the other picture in the center bottom there. That's a child at Vinton School who's writing a thank you letter to veterans. You can see over on the right side of the table there, a beautiful picture that he's drawn for the outside of his card, and meticulously working on a message to the veterans. The next one. Okay. Thanks, guys. You need to get out of that. Hit the escape button on your keyboard. Yeah. For our viewers, there we go. Yeah, right there. That's okay. This is Vivian. Okay, perfect. This is put some other pictures. I guess they didn't make the final cut, but these images of the veterans here are images from a display that was presented to Vinton students, and the image on the bottom there is the Wall of Honor that was created at Goodwin School. We had other activities as well during the day, multiple activities actually across all the schools where students were engaged in learning about veterans and honoring them in multiple ways. It's just a really, again, for the fourth year that we've done this, just a really special day, and just wonderful energy and a developing appreciation, I believe, of our students for the freedoms that we are afforded here in this country. Another really exciting event happened last Saturday. This is a picture of the mural that I'm sure you've noticed on the exterior wall of the community center facing our building. It is a mural that was created in part by grant funds through the Rise Up organization, which is a nonprofit organization that supports both the arts and bringing young people together around diversity and equity issues. And this was a whole community project. Lots of our staff and children and parents had an opportunity to add paint to this mural. It was done in multiple sections and then fastened to the building. And it's done in recognition, certainly of Martin Luther King, but as a message to the community also about the importance of inclusiveness and ensuring rights for all people. This was unveiled officially last Saturday at a ceremony held right in front of it on the lawn of the community center and attended by well over 100 people, and really was just a delightful time. Oh, we lost our presentation, but that's okay. Next slide didn't have any pretty pictures on it, so I can just give you an update. I believe you saw the letter that went out last week regarding some changes to the COVID protocols, with the State Department and the Department of Public Health coming together collaboratively to consider the impact of cases on a school population, a positive case on a school population. And what they found was that many students across the state of Connecticut and in other states as well had been quarantined whenever there was exposure to a positive case. And the study of those students has found that there is very, very little spread of COVID that occurs in our school classrooms. And we believe that's due to the fact that in our classrooms, we use a tremendous number of strategies to mitigate against spread. And so it appeared that students who were quarantining at home, two things were happening. One, they weren't really getting ill, and they were missing out on an awful lot that goes on in school. And so following some pretty strict guidance and criteria, we now are able to identify some students who would not have quarantined even if they've been exposed to COVID in school. If they've been exposed to COVID outside of school, they must still quarantine. But we had our first trial of this just today, actually, with a case in one of our schools, and we were able to identify 2 students who were able to stay through the screening protocol, meaning that they need to screen themselves every day before coming to school. And we also identified some students who we could not apply screening stay to because their exposure was of a riskier, in a riskier environment. And for those students, they need to stay home and not come to school during the quarantine period. So I'm going to end there and just see if you have any questions on that protocol or anything else that I've shared. Nina?
I'll just say that the celebration on Saturday was just wonderful and so appreciative of the students who spoke from MMS and the chamber choir and sang, and you're speaking up with everything that it was very wonderful to see how our school district was represented in that community event. So
Yeah, it was a true community event. It was very nice.
I'm wondering about the change of had it been in place all along, would that have resulted in a lot of students being able to stay in school? In other words, are the majority of students being exposed outside or inside?
Yeah, we believe that if this had been in place last year, there would have been fewer students quarantined for sure. The problem was we really couldn't have implemented it last year. We just didn't have the data to understand how the virus was spreading. And so like so many things with this pandemic, unfortunately, we need to give things time so that we can learn from what's happening and then adjust our practices.
Do you think it will have a good impact in the future? Will impact a small percentage of the population here?
Yeah, I think a combination of things will help us. The Screen and Stay will allow some students, not all who are exposed, but some students to stay in school. The greatest leverage for change really is coming from vaccination. So anybody who is fully vaccinated, meaning 2 weeks past the final dose, does not have to quarantine after an exposure. And we've seen that a few times. We've had an older middle school student exposed. We're able to keep that child in school. And in the cases that we've had this year, children in the upper grades have resulted in very few students who need to quarantine. And so, you know, we just had the clinic for the first dose for the age 5 to 11-year-olds on November 12th. I believe they had 300 doses at the middle school. It was one of 3 clinics in the area. My understanding is they sold out, if you will. The schedule became full very quickly. So we know parents are interested in this. Okay. Great. Thank you.
May I say something about that?
Please do, Dave.
I brought my daughter to the middle school last Friday. I thought it was well organized, and I thought the people there handled everything very well. I really would like to give them a big thanks. It was really a very good setup and operation.
Yeah, and thank you for that. That was organized and run by Eastern Highland Health with a lot of cooperation from the Mansfield Middle School staff as well as our IT staff. And yeah, I heard the same thing, David, that people were really appreciative of that program.
Thank you. Sure. Report of progress?
Yes, I would like to invite our administrators to the table. I'm going to ask Dave if we've changed slide decks. I want to make sure you're seeing a new slide deck. Dave, can you tell me if you're seeing a new slide deck? I'm getting a thumbs up from the back, so I guess we are. Okay, great. So,
Want some music?
I lost.
So I'm pretty excited to share this report with you this evening. And as I shared with you before, the approach that we're taking this year to our development plan is a little bit different. It's different because the focus is its core beliefs. It's different because we've moved away from really strict numeric goals or numeric indicators of success even, and really trying to think much more broadly, and I would argue deeply about the work that we do. I'm going to walk you through how this report of progress connects to that development plan that you've all seen now a few times, and also ask you if following tonight's presentation, your opportunity to read the report thoroughly, to hear from us this evening, and to think about it. If you have any suggestions for us regarding the next report that we're going to give, I'm very open. This is really an experiment, and I don't mean to suggest that we haven't thought about it. We're just throwing things in the air. We thought a lot about it, but we haven't seen the effect of what we're going to share or the process that we're using. So please know we're very much open to feedback. So you did receive a report in your packet. It is a report of progress specifically around the key strategy or the key driver of ensured deep learning. And if you remember, there are 3 such drivers in our report. And we are reporting on one key driver about every 3 months. Rather than giving you one lengthy report at the end of the year, you'll receive 3 reports throughout the year, each report sharing with you the work of the district over the last 12 months. So I'll just remind you that everything we do is really focused on achieving our mission, and that is what grounds us and what drives our work. And as I shared before, all of our work is focused towards achieving, living and achieving, I guess it depends on core beliefs, but certainly living our core beliefs. And as I mentioned before, there are 3 key drivers. And I want to speak a little bit about them because they're not quite as separate as they might sound. Ensure deep learning, know students, and support the whole child. And as we wrote our development plan, we struggled a little bit defining which actions or indicators went with each key driver because of some of that overlap. And I think what you're going to hear this evening also is a bit of overlap among these 3 drivers. But no, again, you know, there's no scientific process has been defined for this. Know that we believe we put the actions and indicators and the highlights we're sharing with you this evening, we think primarily focus on ensuring deep learning. And the other thing I want to remind you of is that deep learning is a term that we are seeing more in educational literature, but we thought it was really important that we define that. What does it really mean if we want students to learn deeply? And so we've defined it as engaging all students in developing knowledge and skills that lead to transfer through application or production. When you achieve, when you develop knowledge and skills to that level, you truly are developing understanding. You're developing understanding at a deep enough level to internalize it and to use it, to make it your own, to do something different with it. And that really is the goal of our instructional work. So the report goes on, as you know, to identify actions. Each action, of course, with a little symbol at the end, connects back to one or more of the core beliefs. And in addition, each of our key strategies includes a set of indicators. And so what you see, on the next slide, what you see in the report that I shared with you is a summary of how we are addressing those actions and indicators. You may notice, this is the first time we've done this, so we're in year 1. You may notice that perhaps not every action and every indicator is included in the report. And if that's the case, we can just haven't gotten to them all yet. But I did try to identify in the report where each action and each indicator is addressed. So before we share the highlights, which is what our administrators are going to do this evening, and share some highlights of what this looks like in our schools, I want to just remind you about the foundation of all of this work. And the foundation of all of this work is our curriculum. So next slide. You've seen many of these slides that I'm going to share with you next before, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. But I want to remind you that our curriculum is written in a very intentional format to support the achievement of what we are calling this deep learning, or in the language of the curriculum itself, to achieve the transfer goal. Those transfer goals are the goals that we want students to achieve in the long term. They're not written at the grade level or at the unit level. They're really written at the end of experience, end of education level. And they are intended for students to be able to act upon them independently without any support. Our curriculum then goes on to describe the understandings, the essential questions that will help provoke students to question and to make their own meaning, and of course, the knowledge and skills that they will acquire. There's a sample on this slide of the 4 transfer goals in mathematics. These are the 4 big ideas that we want students to leave Mansfield Public Schools with deep appreciation, deep understanding of these 4 goals in mathematics. They are developed across all 9 of our grades with increasing complexity from kindergarten through 8th grade. Our curriculum then goes on to illustrate, as I shared on the previous slide, those understandings and questions, and then finally, often written in a series of progressions. The next slide, the knowledge and skills. These come from language arts. And again, I know you've seen all this before, and I detailed it in the report. But what's incredibly exciting to us this year is that we now believe we have completed all of the curriculum documentation for every content area across every grade. And that is a huge, was a huge effort. It was an effort that was undertaken by all of these leaders that you see in front of you, along with some of our teacher leaders, such as our literacy consultant for the district, our math science specialist, and our technology integrationist. And those three teachers joined the leaders in front of you, along with Shani Patwa and Jamie Russell, in working with curriculum teams, groups of teachers, teacher leaders who devote additional time to getting this work done and bringing it back to their colleagues. Actually, she mentioned Shani runs the SEL task force, not a curriculum team, but it's, in my mind, it's all the same work. So we go to the next slide. Through our Google system, our shared drive system, every teacher in Mansfield has access to a special drive that is protected, only available to certain Mansfield staff members. So you set the parameters on who gets access to this. And so it is a protected site, and it is where we have published all of our curriculum. So in the old days, we used to give everybody a notebook, and we used to have them tear pages out and put new pages in, and now everything's electronic. So as we make changes, it can automatically be uploaded and available to people in school, out of school, wherever they choose, on their phone, on their tablet, on their laptop, however they choose to access it. If you click on the shared drive, go to the next slide, you'll see a set of folders, one folder for each of the content areas as I mentioned. And when you click on the folder, oh, you'll see a few more folders, but it's how we organize the curriculum. And in each of those folders, there's a plethora of materials. We focus primarily on the curriculum folder and the resources folders right now. Our assessments are still under development, but this shows you what is in the curriculum folder in mathematics. So we put in there the, unfortunately, Google doesn't allow us to order these. I would have ordered them differently than you see them on the screen, but we put in there the math standards. So those are the state and national standards to which we are responsible. Then we have a single document, as you saw in a previous slide, of the 4 transfer goals. And then we also have in that same folder that longer or more complete format that you saw that had the overarching understandings and the essential questions as well for each of the transfer goals. And then we have the learning progressions, Data 5 and 6 to 8. So any teacher can access this very, very easily. And for anybody who doesn't want to sort through the folders, this is something I shared with you before. We have what we call our splash page. It's kind of your one-stop shop for everything in the curriculum folders. And I should have mentioned that our curriculum also includes all of our first year to graduate skills as well. And so from this document, anything in white text, you can click on and it will take you immediately to the document you're looking for. So I'm just thrilled. We've been working on this for about 4 years. I think you're aware of that. To finally have every document in a publishable form is incredibly exciting to us. And so this is our foundation for deep learning. Okay, everybody got all that? Okay, so let's hear about what's happening in the classrooms and what this looks like in our schools. And to help us with that, we're going to start with something that has been happening this fall in grade 2 at Goodwin Schools.
Good evening, everybody. Great to be here and exciting to share this. Deep learning can be large, intentional, big moves, but also what we've learned, and I bring to you a second grade example, but actually it's happening throughout our building. It can be a small instructional move. And so I'd like to share with you this idea of sense making with language-rich math tests. Specifically, it's when students approach what we used to call word problems or story problems. And you probably can guess when a student sees a story problem, they look for some numbers and then they immediately go to work in solving. So Sasha has 7 oranges, Peter has 5, and hands fly up and they're saying 12 without reading or contextualizing the problem. And so we're taking this idea called a 3-read protocol from San Francisco math unit from their district work, and it's called Unit 0, where it focuses in on building norms and skills for students to approach math work with a mathematical mindset. So the simple idea is to not give the question. So students read a word problem or a story problem simply just to build context. What is it about? Again, no question is embedded. The second time they read it, they're just looking for quantities and units. And then the third time they read it, they are going to ask a mathematical question that they want to solve. This promotes deep learning and transfer because students immediately are invested because they're authoring their own investigation. The benefit is that the teacher gets to assess the application and gets to see the strategies that the students are applying. So in the example that I provide to you on the screen, Sasha has 12 oranges, but she gave Patty 7 oranges. When students were given this story problem, again, without a question, one pair of students wrote the question, how many oranges are left? And immediately started to solve the problem, giving evidence of their mathematical reasoning and thinking. The teacher could see that this pair of mathematicians understood the problem. They were able to contextualize it and then create their own questions solved. Another group came up with the question, how many more did Sasha have before she gave some to Patty? And so when you think about that, sophisticated question, yet in that particular example, there were some flaws in their computation and their true understanding of the problem. So deep learning requires us to really think from an instructional standpoint, what tools and protocols are we using to slow students down, to author and own the problem and the work, and then to get out of the way to allow students to show and demonstrate their understanding. The application of math is super important because that's when we get a chance to see a glimpse of transfer. And so again, the 3-read protocol being used in second grade, but also throughout the building, has already netted some gains for us in terms of what teachers understand with deep learning with the students. And more importantly, students love this. So there's higher engagement, there's more investment. In fact, after this problem, students came back the next day and they shared with the teacher, that was really hard. Can we do it again? You know, that is not something you typically hear students, especially when they are engaged for such a lengthy time and invested in such hard work. So again, deep learning, one small move with a profound effect in math instruction.
Thank you. The next example comes from Southeast School, and this is an example from the spring was it born, or the winter and spring last year? Late spring last year. Yeah. This is a opportunity for us to think about 21st century skills, and as Kelly shared the splash page, there was the left-hand side and the right-hand side, the academic skills on the right, the 21st century skills on the left side of the page. This project had an opportunity to really dive into everyone from pre-K through 4th grade, changing the schedule and being a part of a design challenge. During the design challenge, they had a chance to really think about how do we take materials that we were not able to use because of COVID. We used to have a makerspace room, and COVID restrictions didn't allow using that space. So we pushed out materials into each of the classrooms and had an opportunity to think about how to prototype, collaborate, design, receive feedback, make revisions, finalize by taking revisions or changing revisions, and then present their project to other peers. And what you see here, you have a 2nd grade class. You're going to see tons of tape up there and cardboard, and these students had several different challenges that they were working on to try to add a marble to land in a cup that was just ahead of that maze. Through trial and error, there's energy and buzz in the room until they finally get it, and then everyone's going, yes! And then on the bottom, is a first grade example where they had to think about how to create a wind chime. And what is a successful wind chime? Well, number one, it should make music. Number two, it should probably sound beautiful. Number three, it has to balance. What does balance look like in first grade? Where do we hang on one side and then hang on the other side so that they can really get this symmetry going? You know, this is a final example of them adding little pieces on, getting feedback from one another of how to make the aesthetics more beautiful, how to make it sound more beautiful. Each of the projects that was done throughout the school were intended to be collaborative. So if you flip to the next page, Jill, let's click on that link. I do have an administrative intern, so the good news is she put a website together for us. So I'm just wondering, would you like to see a video of either preschool, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, or fourth grade? This is the choice section. What would you like to see?
Preschool.
Preschool, great. We're going to go back up, Jill. I'll go ahead and click on that video. A little girl. That's fun. Make it. Hopefully you can hear it well. Students in preschool were working on balancing outside. They were working on combining materials, working together. So you're going to see, if it opens up, you're going to see a student reflecting on the design. Oh well. Maybe I'll share the videos with you after, so that you have a chance. You can really get to see what this looks like in each of these. Thanks. Go ahead and skip that. Anyway, so deep learning and 21st century learning, what you may have just heard is transfer of skills, transfer 21st century skills with students to be able to create new and different things given a specific challenge. A lot of energy, a lot of excitement, and just one example of many things we have going on.
Is it all right to ask a question now?
Sure. Probably easier to ask now.
From what Peter presented, I think I have some understanding of how you can assess that, how a teacher assesses it. How is the assessment process? How do you do that with this project, please?
I look forward to sharing that with you. Actually, I will follow up in this section. We have prepared the design part and then an assessment part, so I'll share with you how we went ahead and thinking about assessment.
Thank you. Thank you.
The next example we want to share with you comes from 8th grade, and it's a project that is just getting underway. Yes. So in 8th grade, we'll share an example with you. We think about deep learning. We think about often how we can provide students agency and ownership of their learning and get their best engagement. And a project that we've undertaken this year in 8th grade is the Witness Stone project. And so through this experience, students will have the opportunity to restore the history and honor the humanity of enslaved individuals within their community. And so they'll conduct some research and they will learn about the history. They will get involved in civic engagement. And students, after they conduct this research, will spend time creating a biographical sketch of the forgotten. And then ultimately, this project culminates in sharing the stories through art, poetry, essay, and film. And so when we think about deep learning in this particular task, we're thinking about the work that these students will be doing to understand the individual that they're researching about. We'll think about the process skills that they will be applying as they develop these biographical sketches. We'll also think about 5 C skills, their ability to think critically and analyze. For them to create these biographical sketches in a way that's meaningful to them and that they think honors and represents that person, whether it's through poetry, through art, through research. And finally, the students will engage with our community and bringing the community together to a place where they'll honor this individual with a witness stone, and by placing a witness stone in a location in our community that's of significance to that individual. And so the process here, we're thinking about how they're using all of their skills, whether it's research or writing, or their 5C skills to mitigate their thinking, for an authentic purpose and authentic audience. So we're excited to see and you'll hear more about that as we continue the project. We're just in the beginning phases.
Great. So you preempted us, Kathy. No, that's quite all right. You may have noticed that in the report itself, that the report moves from the curriculum to assessment, even before we talk about instruction, because we know that in a really effective system, once you've identified the outcomes that you see, the next thing you need to ask yourself is, how will I know if students have achieved this? And so we are now in the process of working to define in greater detail the assessment practices and the actual assessment experiences that students will have to help us measure our curriculum. However, it's not like we haven't been assessing. All of these projects that you've heard also have included teachers gathering evidence of student learning and assessing student understanding. So the next part of the presentation is actually taking you through some of the work that has occurred in our classrooms around the assessing, or I like to think of it really as evidence, but how do we know? So I think we're going to start again with middle school. Sure. So when I think about assessment, I think of it in two buckets, so to speak. I think about the what we assess, core content, process skills, 5C, skill application. And I also think about how we assess mastery and transference. And so when I think about that, there are a variety of ways in which we really do assess student mastery and transference throughout our days in our school experience. Some are summative tasks. Those would be our performance project-based tasks, unit assessments. We also have other avenues that we pursue. In one case, peer-to-peer feedback. That could be part of the formative process or at the end of a particular project or unit task. And then there's also the self-evaluation and goal setting process that involves the individual learner themselves. So in this particular example, this is something that we would really characterize as a summative task. This is, again, from the 5th grade San Francisco Math Unit. These particular tasks are designed to assess a subset of skills and standards. They allow students to demonstrate their ability to extend and deepen conceptual math understanding. And they offer opportunity to share understanding through multiple representations. What you'll see here is an example of a student that completed a particular math task where they were asked to write expressions, record numbers, fluently multiply and divide in a series of steps. But beyond that, they were also asked to convey their thinking and understanding of the task. The rubric on the top is a rubric that our teachers use to assess students' level of mastery and proficiency in these skill areas. And our math teachers actually meet together and look at student work samples for the whole grade. And so they have conversations about what they're seeing from individual students, but also as a group and as a whole. And so we use this information to inform our instruction, but also know where our learners are at. Another way that we utilize assessment in middle school, and this is one that I really love, this is a larger scale example of something that happens in classrooms, and it's peer-to-peer feedback that allows for discourse and goal setting. This is a rightspace cafe, and so within our building, we have about 50 students that are trained as coaches, and that are staff our rightspace cafe during our X block time period of the day. And they offer coaching sessions to students. And these coaching sessions are not ones that teachers sign students up for. These are coaching sessions that our students, as writers, sign up for themselves. So they would like some feedback from up here. They'll come in at X block, trained coaches will meet with them. support the revision process. And participants in this session engage in goal-setting discussions to focus the session and focus the work that we do. So you have students developing process skills. I might say not just the one that's come in for the coaching session, but also the coach. You've got a group of students that are applying their multiple 5C skills while they're also strengthening the process skills. And their goal is to improve their personal author's craft. This example, on our first days of open, we had over, I think, 35 to 40 kids wanting to be in a session that extend out to multiple rooms. But it's just an incredible way to, a credible example of how our students have agency and ownership in what they're learning and how they're approaching that support.
This is what's another assessment. Teachers as far as
Yes.
Okay.
So there is a whole protocol that they follow, and there's actually notes and documentation that they take. They identify in the process to come in. They identify together what is it that we want to focus on today, whether it's improving the lead to our paragraph. They identify strategies. They note down suggestions. It's all digitized. And then they identify goals that they worked on. And so there's a summary follow-up that is shared with the classroom teachers so they know exactly what that student worked on during the coaching session. Highly organized. Yeah. So something new that we began this year, really, we started it last year with goal setting in 8th grade, but we really started to think through how can we engage our students in the self-evaluation and self-reflection process on their own work? How do we get them metacognitively engaged and thinking about what they're learning about, what they're doing, and engage them in thinking actively about that? So in 8th grade, we also recognized, because we're still in a pandemic, that we weren't able to invite families into the building this year. So we started to think about actively, how can we provide an opportunity for them to engage in dialogue with their child about where they put some of the work that they've done thus far, mid-October, in a structured way. And so in 8th grade, we looked at identifying, having the students self-select 3 pieces of work that make them proud, and write a brief example or brief statement that explains this work and how it shows their growth. And in all cases, students selected 3 samples, and they were able to reflect on why this is important to them. They all took them home and eagerly shared those. And in this case, Maya wrote a reflection. One thing that stood out to me, and one of the pieces was that, reflects on me because it shows who I really am and how I am outside of school and the determination I really put into my work. And knowing her, I know the determination she puts into her work. We just feel that this is a really nice way for our students to be thinking about where they are and where they want to go to next. One more. This is a new initiative in 6th grade. We are just building this out. In fact, we spent some time today talking through the structure and organization of how we can build digital portfolios that follow our students over time and over not only just over a year, but over a series of years. And so in this particular case of self-reflection, self-evaluation, we're working with 6th graders to build web-based portfolios that allow for self-reflection and personal goal setting. This portfolio will allow them to self-select pieces to include and to reflect on across the content areas that they are a part of. And it allows them to think about what goals they'd like to set, what their personal reflections on the growth we've made over the course of the year. And it allows them to mark this progress over time. So this is something we started in 6th grade, but in 7th grade, it'll be able to continue, and in 8th grade. And so our vision is at the end of this year, they'll be able to participate in a conference with someone important to them, where they share some of this work and share what they've learned through the experience this year. And then my hope would be, and our hope and goal is by the end of 8th grade, they can have a larger conversation about the growth they've made over their time at Mansfield Middle School, and that's important. So I think what you heard, we have a little more to share too, but just in those middle school examples alone, what you heard is that just like we want students to be making meaning and be at the center of their learning, we want them to also be in the center of their assessment practices. So the teacher is not the only person who gives feedback, or the only person who assesses understanding, but we want students engaged in that process as well, because when students understand their own learning, then they know how to direct it better. They know where they need to focus, they know how to ask for help. But to Edith's question before, it's always this give and take between the teacher and the student, so that the teacher is also informed and knows how to target instruction. But beyond looking at assessing academic skills, we've also been thinking about that other side of learning, the importance of really knowing the student and knowing what contributes to their engagement in deep learning. And so Vinton School has taken on a really unique initiative this year, and I'm going to let Mike tell you about that.
Hi, and I should know better than to go last, but these great examples. I was going to say the same exact thing Kelly just said, that we're really trying to put in a student-centered classroom, the phrase you've heard so much, putting students at the center of assessment in really meaningful ways. And it's definitely tricky. It's a journey. We're trying to figure this out. And I think most districts have not. This is new ground, and it's really heartwarming to see just amazing work going on. So this, the next slide, really came out of the Equity Institute work that I went to in July, I think it was, and very much connected to deeper learning. So, that in students in deeper learning classrooms, just to if you look at like the work of Pedro Noguera or the Hewitt Foundation or Theo Farrington, giants in the field of equity and deeper learning, there's a book called Street Data by Sefer and Duggan, I think, that really influenced my thinking, that suggests that if students in classrooms are doing rigorous and relevant work, if they feel a sense of belonging in that space, if they feel a sense of self-efficacy, if they demonstrate a growth mindset, the idea that if I work really hard, I'm going to accomplish my goals, and if they have agency, then they're really, they are in a deeper learning environment, and they're also in a really equitable space. And I think if you've seen all the examples, if you think of these criteria in all the examples, you can see these coming to life. Thanks. So based on those 5 kind of bullets, I took this work to our, I designed a little equity project at the Institute, and I took it to our leadership team at Vinton. It's made up of like 8 to 10, half of our staff, really amazing, and shared my thinking on this kind of in depth for about 20 minutes or so. And then we just started in on a protocol to design some questions that we could ask kids through a survey and through student interviews. So we have asked kids similar questions in Mansfield, I think since I've been here, at least 3 or 4 years now. I've revised that survey a couple times and so have others. We've done it twice a year. And now the idea here is to do it frequently. Maybe the leadership team suggested once a month, but to keep it manageable and practical, ask 5 questions. So we went through a protocol and we got it down to these 5 questions. I'm a learner, I do important work, I matter and feel cared for. At school, I persevere to work towards my goals, and I take action to create change. We felt those 5 questions or statements, and using a Likert scale kind of thing, address those 5 bullets above. And one more time. And then I worked with Louis Dauphiné. I asked him how to say his name today. I think I said it right. And he did this amazing job. I just said, hey, here's my vision. Can you make this go? So I wanted a public document. What I mean public is that every teacher at Vinton can see the results. So every kid in a 4th grade class takes the survey once a month, and the 4th grade teacher can see all the results on that slide. We're still kind of trying to tweak that, the bar graph to make it a little simpler dashboard to read. But you can go in there as any Vinton school member and see what's going on at the grade level, what's going on at the classroom, what's going on with individual kids. So we're excited. We have not started this yet. Asking is this. I would like to do it in survey form and in interview form. So if a child says to me, I do employment work in school, I would say, hey, can you give me an example of that? And maybe we talk about one of the examples tonight. And I would really like to dig in to see what they think those things mean. So I'm hoping this is a stream of data in addition to everything else that was talked tonight will be helpful for us, especially in our work development.
Thank you. One more piece on assessment, actually, Mike. So the other thing that we assess, of course, are our postgraduate skills. And so we're going to go back to that design challenge at Southeast, and Lauren's going to give you a couple of examples of how they assess students' work towards those postgraduate outcomes.
This is an opportunity that 73 students who participated at the end of the challenge in a survey. We were focused on really these 5 goals, students being creative at any grade level, kindergarten to 4th grade. Them being collaborative, giving feedback, receiving feedback, which is something we've worked on, and then making your design better based on the feedback. So really this design challenge was about the process skills, not so much the end product. And this is where students were asked to respond. So if they said, yes, I was creative, we have a high number of students who said, yes, a lot. The blue line is a lot. The red line is a little. And the orange line stands for no, they didn't feel that they were. So in addition to, students who were, you can tell by the energy in the room, you can tell by the work that was created, there's some tangible evidence. But coming back to a student and saying, share with me what you thought, really helps us to refine and know, are we on the right track, with this kind of work? And this, I would say, yes, in this example. And moving forward, teachers also in each classroom had an opportunity to lean in conversations. They act more as a facilitator during the design challenge, listening in, having an opportunity to hear the conversations, taking notes down, and that looked different from kindergarten through 4th grade. But one of the core features that we looked at during the design challenge was that everyone would follow a design process. That process was first they would ask questions, then they would imagine, then they would plan, create, test, and improve. And it was clear from this that we felt very much that between the asking and the imagining, this is possible at every single grade level. And that's, I think, what we were out to test. We've seen, and we at Southeast have tried experiments like this with older students, and you often wonder, what does it look like in the youngest ages? And we finally, gotten to a point where we can see what this looks like with preschoolers, kindergartners, and 1st graders. So it's an exciting, we've been working on this as a district for such a long time, but every year you've heard Kelly say, we deepen our understanding, we deepen our work. And this is an example, of that, us getting to a place as an administrative team that now we finally feel like we're seeing the progress and the fruits of the labor from our students.
I'll just add, Lauren, if you don't mind, when you guys sit there and they creative and use feedback, though, they know what those terms mean, because we've done a lot of work with them to really define those terms and understand what effective feedback is, what to do with feedback.
So those were many lessons upon many lessons over years.
So I have one more piece to share with you, but do you have any questions on what you've heard about the assessment process? Okay.
I have a question, because this is really impressive teaching and learning with students. Have you guys had any or seen any struggles with any loss of learning, or that really just shouldn't affect how it is through the pandemic? Yeah, I would say that it varied tremendously as an individual student answer. We have students who I would say were not really impacted. And then we have students who I would say were very impacted. I don't know if it's true for everyone.
So with the students who have been impacted, do you feel like they're adapting to these rigorous self-demands, or there's still a good learning curve with that?
For those students, engagement is really, and relationships is the core. So if we're able to do those two things, develop a relationship, which that continues to be something we all work on every day, having that relationship and then being able to present them with developmentally appropriate work is really the goal. And you're finding, what I'm finding is that I am seeing students that while they may not have had any opportunity with kindergarten, no opportunities to play in a sandbox with one another because they've been home, they've been, isolated from others. There are significant skills that we are needing to teach into, and that's changed. But it's where students are, and I think there's a great understanding that it's okay to, observe and then be able to adjust your practices because it's where students need the support. And then you also have the role models in the class that, still need the support too and have their bad days and their moments. So I think that every teacher is working with every student, all the time, wherever they are. Small class sizes like that, you give us an opportunity to meet those needs.
Okay, so I think that's a great lead-in.
No.
Okay, it's a great lead-in to the last part of this presentation, which is really about what are our indicators telling us, and what's our performance data like, because these are wonderful experiences that you've heard about, but at the end of the day, we need to make sure our students are meeting all of the goals and expectations of education, and that includes not just the transfer goals that we identify and acquiring the knowledge and skills in our curriculum, but how are they performing on more standardized assessments as well. And so we believe that a really effective assessment system is a combination of self-assessment, a variety of strategies for gathering evidence in the classroom along a series of progressions and against our transfer goals, and some standard measure that gives us an indication of how our students do out in the world, so to speak. My head is thinking of several things to tell you, but let me try to stay focused for a minute. I'm showing you a couple of things that we've done, and much of this was in the report anyway. But again, I remind you that we do have indicators, things about which we are gathering evidence, and I describe how we're doing some of these in more detail in the report. But I wanted to highlight a couple of things tonight. So you heard Mike talk about a survey, and he mentioned that we've been taking surveys for quite some time. We do every year, sometimes twice a year, sometimes even more than that. We've been surveying our students, our parents, and our teachers. And I wanted to give you a few highlights of last year, some of the questions that we think connect to this notion of ensuring deep learning. So to students, we asked, the work I do in class is challenging, the work I do in school is interesting, and I see the connections between the work I do in school and the real world. And you can see there's some variability in those questions and responses, both within the grade levels and across the grade levels. And I can tell you that these data were some of what got the middle school thinking about maybe we need to engage kids a little bit more in this assessment process and find out what they're really, how they're really doing their work. So, next slide. So we asked similar questions, and isn't this interesting? And pretty similar questions, but look at the responses. The percent that agree or disagree are much higher across the board. My child is challenged. My child makes connections between learning in school and the real world, and school is interesting to my child. These are incredibly positive results. Sure.
You gave these surveys really close to you. You gave these the same survey in the previous year? Yes.
And how does that data compare to the data that we had in the past spring, which was a
year and a half, well, a year and a quarter pandemic?
I would say at the elementary school, it was very, very similar to previous years, and I think at the middle school, it was slightly depressed. Is that correct? And
Especially that last number.
Yeah. Yes.
So that maybe is more a measure of the students overall.
Very much. And their overall experience last year, where remember our middle schoolers were hybrid much longer than our elementary students. And then just to give you an example of how we're continually trying to find ways to also, as one of our core beliefs says, grow educators, we also checked in with our teachers. And there were two examples actually in your report. I've just shared one of them here. These data come from surveys that we gave at the beginning and the end of a workshop we did earlier this fall, focused on regrounding people again in the Mansfield curriculum design and unveiling to them the final fully completed curriculum system that I shared with you before. And we were very pleased. We surveyed them pre and post workshop, and pre-workshop, many of them felt that they had a pretty good understanding of our curriculum and of transfer goals and about the expectations for their work. And then when we surveyed them again after the 3-hour workshop, we were quite thrilled to see that those 3 hours had been really effective, because about 70% expressed having a better understanding after the work that we did that day. So really helpful to us, because ultimately we're supporting our teachers to be learners as well.
That's a good question. I'm sorry to interrupt. I know we're goal. I guess my question is always, all, as you mentioned, all this is so exciting and Jeff, I know we've talked a lot and heard a lot about how to support staff around all of these big shifts in mentoring students and making sure that you're building choice in small moves and big moves. And so, and especially this year, I know there's a lot of conversation around that. So if you could just take a minute and talk a little bit about the systems that are in place to support staff. It's wonderful to hear about this one survey around, a workshop, but I think about it in a much broader way, especially as we're pushing everyone to do some different stuff. Thank you.
Sure. And I'm not sure if we're going to share some of the PDAC survey. No, we're not. We survey teachers every year in terms of their perception of the goal process. And it was very favorable that teachers feel supported and they feel connected, because as you may recall, we shifted our teacher goal setting that's around student learning to professional learning. So how are you going to do that? And then again, we've gotten out of the driver's seat so that it can be individualized. The work that is happening is led by teachers. And so it's pretty profound when teachers get excited about deep learning, they take off of it. And so the examples that I brought today at Goodwin, that was all teacher generated. They sought that material out, they're looking, they're reading books, they're taking part in summer book clubs and book studies. It is just an amazing phenomenon that our teachers feel empowered and that they have the tools, and most importantly, they have the time. And we continue to have conversations that learning has to be everywhere, anywhere, anytime. And so we're trying to think about systems that make it predictable and support teachers on a consistent basis, but also on an as-needed basis. So for example, a team wants to investigate more of these story problems. They need a couple of extra hours. Administrators think creatively, how can we do that and build them around? So I think what we're seeing is that though there is a concern about how to manage that work-life balance, and that we're still coming out of the pandemic where there is stress in the workplace from time to time, we get excited about deep learning. We get excited about authoring new projects, and we look for those promising practices, and we more importantly have the structures that support the teacher learning professions.
So there were two questions in the report from that survey that Peter mentioned, that PDEC survey. But I'll just reinforce that we believe that our teachers need to be given opportunities to learn the same way we want our students to learn. And so when you put teachers in the driver's seat, right, what do you really need in order to support your students? That's the big question. We found tremendous results, and we had the last phase of our teacher rel process is actually a sharing stage, and we had a sharing session in August, teacher to teacher, and wow, I mean the projects people engaged in last year were very exciting, but even more exciting was when we surveyed staff after that experience, them telling us the passion they felt from their colleagues and how impressed they were with the work of their colleagues and how much they were learning from their colleagues. And that was really exciting. There are lots of other ways we're supporting teachers too. And now we're getting into kind of that overlap area, because we started to put together some of these indicators. We said, there's so much that we're doing to know our students more, for us to know them more deeply around how we use data, especially when it comes to early literacy data and how we're using those data to provide supports to individual students. Likewise, we need to make sure teachers have the skills to know how to teach those to those needs. And so I promise you're going to hear more about that in 3 months when we do our presentation on no students. So the last piece I want to share with you is that I think if this were a typical year, the last piece I would offer you here are our standardized performance measures on state assessments, where I could share with you how our students performed this year, how they performed in relation to other districts, how they performed in relation to ourselves in previous years, how much growth they made. Well, it is incredibly challenging to do any of that this year because of the variability of schooling students experienced last year, the variability of how they took the test. Some students took it in school, some students who were remote came into school to take it, and some students who were remote stayed home and took a remote version of the test. And so what the state has been doing is trying to understand what is, to Kelly's question before, what is the impact of this pandemic on students? And what they have found across the state by looking at the scores of thousands and thousands of students is that the more time students were in school last year, typically the higher their performance was. They've also been looking at growth and do see patterns where students over the last 2 years are not keeping up with the growth patterns that we were able to achieve pre-pandemic. None of that should be a surprise to us, right? We've looked at some of those data ourselves here in Mansfield, and our evidence is a little more variable because of who chose to stay home and who we chose to bring into school full time. So for example, very, very early on, children with special needs, children who needed more support were brought into school 5 days a week well before others. It makes it look like the kids that had a lot of schooling, their scores were depressed, but they were our students that were struggling the most. Likewise, our students who tended to stay home the longest were students who had the family supports to be able to continue learning at home. And in some grades, their performance looked really great. So we took a look at something else. This is actually data that's available now on a secured portal that's open to administrators from the state. And I tried to explain it to you in the report, but let me just walk you through this. It really is pretty interesting data. So this is performance on Smarter Balance Assessment over the years. So you can see on the bottom from 3rd grade through 8th grade. And there are 2 lines. One line is a cohort that has experienced the pandemic more significantly. So the red line illustrates students in the grade they were in last year. So this is 5th grade math. So you'll see in 5th grade, you see a little red dot where the students performed. And you can follow it back to 3rd grade, which was 2019, how they performed in 3rd grade. You don't see any red dot in 4th grade because that was 2020. They didn't take the test that year. That was the year we were all home and nobody took the test. So you can see the trend of performance for those last year's fifth graders and compare it to the black line, those are the kids that last year were in seventh grade, and they too experienced the pandemic, but it wasn't until sixth grade. So you can see that our last year's fifth graders are not keeping up with the cohort that most immediately preceded them. And the colored bars show you the performance bands on the Smarter Balance assessment. So the one good news is that you can see that our fifth graders started out just slightly above the middle of the mastery band. And in fifth grade, they're right in the middle of the mastery band. So they've lost some ground, if you will, but not a lot of ground. They just are not performing quite as well as the cohort before them. So lots of ways to interpret the graph. So if you go to the next one, and this is in reading, by the way, where we found less loss, if you will, if you want to use that term, less loss of learning. You can see last year's eighth grade group, those two lines are so close together, it suggests that they've been performing almost identical to the cohort before them. And then when you look at math, you start to see a little bit different story. And this, is, again, is true not just in Connecticut, this is true nationwide, that the performance in math seems to have suffered more. If you go to the next slide, this is the fifth grade math performance. Now look at that gap between those two lines, and also look at what happens to where those dots are located. A little bit above the center of the mastery band, now to the very bottom of that mastery band. And then finally, eighth grade, where you can see that our kids performed pretty similarly, oops, right up until 2019, and now look, our eighth graders have lost some ground. So we think this is helpful data to help us just continue to monitor groups of students. I will caution you though that all of this is still that assessment data that's so hard to know how reliable it is, because it was gathered through a traditional assessment in a pandemic when schooling was so variable for children. So the value of this maybe is still on the horizon, but we think it's interesting to take a look at. So I just want to conclude by saying that I'm really proud of the work these people have done and their teachers. None of this work is possible without a tremendous team of people working together. And I think one of the things that we can be very proud of in Mansfield is that we really created a culture where everybody engages in the work and builds understanding. But I will also share with you that we are getting quite sophisticated, and we're moving into a realm of work, especially when you think about assessment and where this needs to go, to truly ensure that all of our portrait of graduate skills and all of our transfer goals are being met. We need to put a tremendous amount of effort into and deep thinking ourselves into building out an assessment system that's just as rich as our curriculum system. And I'm going to tell you that I think that takes more devoted attention than what we're able to give through these curriculum teams and administrators who are running buildings at the same time that they're working with curriculum teams. And for that reason, and you will hear more about this in a couple of months, but for that reason, I am going to recommend or propose in my budget that I present to you in January that we add a director of curriculum position here so that we really have somebody who's able to shepherd this work forward in the future. And that's my hour of the report. So, any other questions?
Parts of the school program, are they following the same model? Been feeding into this? Or
Oh yeah, they're following an absolute same curriculum for sure, and certainly very similar assessments, combination of teacher observation and assessment, student self-assessment, and some standardized measures as well.
There were these pages in the packet, people were trying to find it. It's talking about grade 10 and how he had been following some, I can't find the page right now, but it was
As part of these charts?
it was in the packet that we had and grade that there's been an assessment of grade 10.
No, I
this one, I think, marked up the one that we were sent. I'll find it later. Okay. Sorry. That's okay.
Sorry, I have just a quick question. The data that you just presented, I know with all the caveats around this part of balance last year, are you in your portal, can you disaggregate across, like, are you able to get bands of student performance? Or is it from student grade level? Like, can you look at the students who are at the bottom quartile or subsidized?
Yeah, so we can download the data set and then we can organize it to do that, yes. And some of the data in, it's not bottom quartile, but some of the data in the report shows a comparison that we've done in the past, looking at the growth rates of students with special education needs versus students with special education needs tend to be the ones in our bottom quartile.
I also wonder, you know, again, that's not, you know, but just that really you're most concerned about that, right?
Right. Okay, education. In the packet, it's stated in the rate. So it just great attention should change in the last year's middle school. So this is
So this is So you're looking at the math performance. That's this right here. So this is what I was describing before. So the black line shows the performance of students who are now in 10th grade. And it shows what their performance was when they were in 8th grade.
All right.
I know.
I understand that.
Yeah,
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kelly?
I just need to shout out, like, Kelly kind of like everyone, but I feel like every time you present, you always also share the next step and indicate that there's more work to be done. But this is amazing that this has been put together with the pandemic and the loss of learning. I mean, everyone has been teaching and learning through a traumatic event, and there's actually very little indication that our kids have even experienced this. And so I think that the way you guys present and all understand the material really shows that you model collaboration, and I know that that's what our teachers and students need. And so, like, we just need to take a pause and recognize how really wonderful this is.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's kind of blows you away. What I really am taking away from this is the equity and the SEL that's embedded in almost everything that we're talking about. And that truly is remarkable and just best. Thank you. May I ask one more last assessment question, not for me, for several. How do we report this out to parents? Or is that the next step? Okay.
No, so what's this that you want to report? Like this whole presentation or student performance?
Things to get report card. Yeah.
Okay, so when we started this work, immediately teachers said, we have to change our report card. And I said, we will. You have to get to a point where you know what you want to report to parents before you can change the reporting system. I think we're about there. And we're doing some work through our ARC grant with the Great Schools Partnership. I think I told you about that work. They've done a tremendous amount of work in assessment and grading practices, as well as reporting practices. And so I do think that we are not too far away from changing that. In addition, we didn't talk about this tonight. It might be mentioned in the report, I think. We've got a couple of schools that are using student-led conferences this year. In fact, they're next week, right? And so I know a couple of grade levels or a couple of teachers at the middle school. I know, again, some grade levels among the elementary schools. They're getting kids to share with their parents what this learning is all about. And, you know, we also have to educate our parents to what are the outcomes we're seeking for our students. And so, you know, that family guide to the curriculum that I presented, the learning pathways curriculum is one effort. But yes, we need to keep talking about this. Even more.
Martha?
Where I give the show what was lost in the event. A lot of news stories that are saying how much was lost because in our town, our students. And I think parents would be, interested in seeing some graphing that is easy to understand, to see, what the staff is faced with, how they have to really, go up and which did not. I mean, I think it'll happen.
It will.
But it's just like, right, people need to see that, yeah, we had, we're stuck on everybody else. So just to see it in front of our eyes.
Anyone else?
Well, thank you. I know that was a long report, but we had a lot to share.
Wonderful. Just, how do you make sure the teachers have time to do what they need to do? How do you guys make sure you have time? And that goes back to curriculum. Okay, I got it. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Tom. Awesome. Just awesome. Okay. Now on to the proposed DOE calendar.
Oh, you are.
Are we? We are. Okay. We've all taken a look at the calendar at the last meeting, so we need to vote on this tonight. Anybody have any questions, comments? All right, I'll take a motion to approve the proposed Board of Education calendar for.
No, it's the calendar year.
2022. Thank you.
I'll second.
Wait.
Way too many things here.
There you go. All right, Jill, we had a motion by Edith to approve the proposed Board of Education calendar, 2022, and a second by Suzanne. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye, please. Aye. David and Catherine, are you still with us?
Still with you, kind of trying to listen to getting about every other word here.
Yeah, me too. I'm been terrible, but unless I say nay, I'm a yay.
Okay, David, are you okay with approving the?
I am, if you can hear me.
So that's unanimous. Thank you. And now update on the school building project.
I just noticed I've got the slides backwards. So I'm going to start with the roof
Start with the
project,
roof.
if you don't mind. These are some images from last week of the middle school roof. The work is going on every afternoon. They're there. I think they're starting to work around 3 or 3:30, and they're finishing it around 11 or 11:30. And they are just making progress one little patch of roof at a time. We've been very fortunate. They've been working for about 2 weeks. I think they've had one night of rain. So I've never wanted a drier winter in my life. But it's going well. We've had some good cooperation with the roofing company. We've had a couple little hiccups with, a ventilation system that probably ran at the wrong time and produced some noxious odors one day. We took care of that. A little bit of cleanup around the school. They were very responsive to our request to get that cleaned up. And so we're moving forward with it.
So supplies not an issue.
They have every item they need already on site.
Martha, what shift do they work?
Kind of like a second shift, like a 3 to 11 sort of shift. It's gonna rain? Oh no.
And then you just said that. Yeah. It doesn't start till 11.
Oh, perfect.
It doesn't be finished.
They'll be just finishing, right? And they've had some pretty warm nights too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I do.
Yeah, I think total, I asked again about a week ago. Everybody's saying 6 to 8 weeks total. So, I'm wondering about that, but that's what everybody, both their people and our people are saying now, watching the pace of their work. So we're hopeful by the first of the year, they should be just about done.
They work over the Thanksgiving, like Friday. After Thanksgiving.
I don't know if we've
They
heard
could
that
do a
yet.
double shift that day.
I know. What's wrong with Saturday and Sunday? But I think if they start to hear that, and they told us this last summer when we had to push the project off, if they start to hear that the weather is really bad or that there's snow on the way, they will try to make up some time with some weekend work. So we'll see what happens. One thing I do want to make sure you're aware, I think we've mentioned this here before, but because of the time of year that this roof is being finished, they will not finish the solar project and solar component of this roof likely until the spring or summer. So, and that's okay with us. We just want to make sure we stop the leaks. Yeah, exactly. And so this is not a very pretty picture, but I was on the site at elementary school last week, and I was just fascinated by this. This is the old softball field C, which doesn't look very pretty, does it? They will put it back better than it was. But this is the geothermal field. And so each of those little things sticking out of the ground is a geothermal well. And they're at the point of connecting all the piping with the geothermal wells. And it's just fascinating to see. I had a chance to get up close to the drilling machine, and I think it goes down about 400 or 500 feet, and it's sending pipe down that whole way. It's really quite fascinating. I also had a chance to walk the whole perimeter of the building. I can go to the next slide. Oh, you're gonna lose it. Okay. The building is really taking shape. The next picture I'm going to show you, I actually pulled off the website today, off the live cam, so you can see it yourself. But every day you'll see that more and more of the shape of the building is evident. And the steel, yeah, there you go. And look at that. Yeah, it's starting to look like a building, right? So this too is getting quite exciting. Very exciting. Okay, and that's the end of the report. Okay, thank you, Paul.
I don't believe we have any new business. That brings us to our second hearing for visitors. Okay. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, please? A motion. Thank you, Kelly. Do I have a second? Thank you, Edith. Anyone opposed to approving the consent agenda? Any abstentions? That's, thank you.
Students are leaving, and they're going to be leaving now in the year. Is it fully replacing
Maternity.
Yeah.
There's a difficulty replacing any person right now.
Oh, I was just what I wanted to.
Yeah. Yes, there is a challenge replacing them, and trying to remember
There's a long-term substitute or whatever.
Oh.
Well,
Yeah, well,
two leaving for maternity, right? Until the remainder of the year, and then I got 6 months.
Yep. So one of the people leaving on maternity leave is one of our district specialists, and she's actually going to do some work from home on a per diem after she gets past her first 12 weeks. And the other, we have a substitute in that position now. We're looking to see if that person can continue, and maybe some certification issues there. And then we have another teacher who had to resign because of personal family reasons, and we're a little concerned about filling that position at this time of the year. We found, we were able to fill all of our positions before school opened, but what has happened is that every person has been offered up, and So now mid-year, it's really challenging to find anybody.
All right, and I will accept the motion to adjourn. Thank you, Edith. Second? Oh, come on. Thank
I'll
you.
second it.
Thank you, Dave. All right, all in favor?
Aye.